Okay, so as we were talking about yesterday on the ACT Math live stream, the possibility of doing an SAT Math live stream. So that's what we're doing here today. There was a lot of requests, when's the next SAT Math live stream? So I had some time, so I thought I would jump on here again. So what I thought we could do is, if you're jumping onto the live stream, just introduce yourself, kind of let us know where you're calling in from, and if you can ask questions. The more specific your question, the more that we can address that question and help you. But I think what I'll just start off by saying is, the SAT, it's been completely revised, and it's oftentimes referred to online as the new SAT or the revised SAT. And basically, the way the SAT is set up is there's basically two sections, right? There's a calculator section and there's a non-calculator section. And then amongst the calculator section, you've got a multiple choice section as well as a free response section. And it's the same thing with the calculator section. There's a free response, and then there's also a where you grid in, and then there's also a multiple choice. So it makes it a little bit more challenging because it's not all just multiple choice. But if you're just joining us, can you let me know, can you hear me okay? Is the volume okay? Are you able to hear what I'm saying? If you could just comment and let me know. But yeah, if you're just joining us here, what we're going to do today, the plan is basically to do like a question and answer session just regarding SAT type questions, SAT math questions. So you probably know me from my YouTube channel, Mario's Math Tutoring. I've got hundreds of videos on there so far talking about all different aspects of math, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, pre-calculus, as well as ACT and SAT videos on there. So, but today we're specifically focused on, the SAT math section. So yeah, so basically that's the idea. So if you're just joining us, welcome, and let me know maybe if there's some questions you have regarding the SAT. Is there something that you want to talk about specifically? Right now I can see that people are just starting to hop on, but go ahead and introduce yourself, and let me know if are there questions or things that you want to discuss. We can certainly do that. So yeah, also want to let you know that on my YouTube channel, if you're looking for additional help, above and beyond what we're going to be talking about today, I've got some of the worked out solutions to some of the SAT tests, and I also have some other videos just talking about some SAT concepts. But if you're just joining us here now, live, introduce yourself. Maybe let me know kind of what you'd like to talk about. If you have some specific questions, and we can jump right into that and talk about those. So okay, let's see. So Kezia O says, I'm scared of the SAT because of that math grid-in section. I like to stick to multiple choice. Well, Kezia, I'm right there with you. That definitely is what makes it more difficult, is that they kind of just leave it completely up to you, and you can put that answer in that grid-in section, either as a decimal or as a fraction. So yeah, that's the thing. It is a little bit more challenging because of that grid-in. They just leave it up to you. But yeah, so Kezia, any questions, anything you want to ask me about, any types of problems you want to discuss, maybe things that, have you taken the SAT already? How did that go if you did? I know everyone's getting, ready for the next test coming up here, not too long from now. But most students are on summer vacation, so some students are taking advantage of, studying now and making the most of that time to prepare. Okay, so you've only taken the ACT so far. How'd you do on the math section of the ACT, Kezia? What did you get on that section? Do you remember? Any problems that really tripped you up? Any specific type of problems with the ACT? Oh, you got an 18 on that section. Okay, so you definitely have some room for improvement. So that's, in that sense, it's definitely good. You can definitely boost that score up from there. What math class are you in right now? Are you in Algebra 2, or are you Geometry, Pre-Calculus? What level math are you in right now? Because sometimes when students, they take the ACT and SAT, they haven't reached, some of the statistics right now. Okay, good. So there are some statistics problems on there, where they talk about the mean, the median, the mode, standard deviation range, that kind of thing. So that definitely will help you. But yeah, I know sometimes students, they want to take the SAT, but they haven't had all the math yet. So that definitely makes it a little bit more challenging. But what do you think? So are there any questions, anything that maybe I can help you with today? I'm just making myself available Of course, I've got tons of videos on my Mario's Math Tutoring YouTube channel regarding the SAT and the ACT as well, but I thought I would jump on here live. So right now, we've just got 1 or 2 people, but if you have specific questions, things you want to ask me, we can talk about it. So I'm just making myself available to my viewers and also to some new people that might have just found me here online. So it says, I'm a senior, I've taken everything, it's just I have trouble retaining the information. Oh, okay, so that's a good point, Kezia. Well, yeah, sometimes, that's what makes it a little bit difficult, is because it's been a while since you've done geometry, or you've done, Algebra 1 or, Algebra 2 and that. So what I would recommend is, have you gone to the SAT College Board website, where you can download those free practice tests, the official practice tests that they've released? Have you checked out those resources yet? I think right now, up to this point, there's 8 practice tests on there, and they've got the answer keys, and you can take those tests, and you can either do them online or you can print them and then just do them like as you would in the real exam scenario. But if you haven't, I would go over there and maybe download or do the online tests there and start practicing. And the ones that you're missing, if you see a trend, if there's like maybe geometry questions, maybe you can focus more on that section, or algebra and so on. But that's probably the best way to get some practice. Okay, Mac is on. Okay, welcome, Mac. So I'm 25 and I'm practicing to take the PSAT in 10th grade. Okay, all right. So when you say 25, you mean you scored a 25 when you took the test, or you're what? I didn't quite catch that, but okay, but you're taking the PSAT. Well, the PSAT, slash NMSQT, as they sometimes call it, it's an opportunity where students, if they score really well, they could get scholarships and that kind of thing. But they're very similar, the PSAT to the actual SAT. So definitely everything we're going to talk about today, it can be applied to the PSAT or the SAT. So can you guys and gals, can you hear me all right? Is the volume loud enough? Can you hear me? So this is kind of a unique opportunity. I mean, we can talk about whatever you like to talk about. We can do any types of problems you want to discuss. If there's things that, oh, y'all, it's really quiet. Oh, okay, Kezia says, yep, you're good. Oh, okay, all right. Well, okay, so I hope the volume is good enough. Let me see if I can turn it up on my end. Maybe it's... Okay, so maybe that's a little bit better. But yeah, so what do you think? So what types of questions do you want to talk about? Anything you want to discuss? More specific, the better. But I'll just kick it off just to kind of get us going. So say, for example, let me ask you a question. Say I gave you an equation like this. Say we had 3x minus 2y equals 12. Oh, okay, Dario, welcome, Dario. Linear angles in finding missing angles. Oh, okay, yeah, we can talk about that, Dario. Yeah, let's do this question first, and then we'll talk about angles a little bit. But yeah, if you're just joining us, put some questions in the chat, and we can talk about whatever you like to talk about. The more specific, the better. So I'm just kind of making up a problem here, just to kind of show you like a potential type of problem that you might encounter on the SAT. So when you look at these two lines, okay, these are equations of lines. How would you find the solution of this system? So remember, equation of a line. Okay, there's a line, right? Okay, Dario, more like Mario. Okay, got it. All right. So yeah, so basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to find that point of intersection of these two lines, right? So any ideas? Anybody have some thoughts about how we can solve this system? I mean, there's, of course, the graphing method, right? There's the substitution method. There's the elimination method or the addition method, however you want to call that particular method. There's matrices. There's guess and check. If you have the solutions, you can back substitute. But what do you think? Any ideas on how we could solve this system? Anybody want to jump in and give us an idea? How would you solve that system of equations? This is definitely something that they test on the SAT as well as the ACT, really knowing how to solve systems of equations. So what do you think? What would you do first? Any ideas? Well, what do you think? Any ideas? So basically, okay, if I was going to do this problem, what I would notice is that the variables are lined up here on the left, the numbers are on the right. So I would probably think more along the terms, along the lines of elimination. So I would think to myself, maybe I could eliminate these x's, for example, right? So what I could do is take this top equation, multiply it by what? -2, right? So if I do that, what does that give us? I'm going to put the answer down here. That's -6x plus 4y equals negative 24. Okay, so now when we add these together, what happens? Well, you can see that the x's are canceling out, the y's are canceling out, so we're getting 0 equals negative 6. So what does that tell us when we get 0 equals negative 6? Can anybody let me know about that? What do you think? What does that tell us when we get 0 equals negative 6? What do you think? Definitely doesn't make any sense, right? If it was 0 equals 0, that would make sense because that's always true. But 0 equals negative 6, that's never true. Okay, Dario's saying no solution. Dario, you're absolutely right. So yeah, because 0 does not equal negative 6, that means that there's no solution. And the reason that there's no solution is because if you were to graph these two lines, they would actually be parallel, okay? And they're not going to intersect, they're not going to cross. Now, if you got 0 equals 0 or 6 equals 6, or the same thing equals the same thing, then that's called an identity, okay, meaning that the two equations are identical. And what happens is the two lines are like they're basically the same line, so they're crossing at an infinite number of points. So that would be an infinite number of solutions, or infinitely many. So yeah, so these are some special scenarios that you might come across when you're solving systems of equations. Okay, but let's see. So let's see. Somebody was asking about basically lines and that type of thing, like angles and that sort of thing. So I'll just give you some different scenarios. Like, okay, so when you have a line, and say we have like maybe another ray coming off that line like that, what do you know about these two angles right here? Do you remember that from your geometry class? So when you have a straight line like this, right, that's called a straight angle. And how many degrees are there in a straight angle? What do you think? Well, it's basically half a circle, right? So yeah, that's right, Kezia, it's 180 degrees. So that means that these two angles are going to be, yeah, that's right, Dario, 180. So that means these two angles are supplementary. These are called a linear pair, and these two angles are going to add up to 180. So they may give you something like that on the test where it's like maybe this angle is 3x plus 10, and maybe this angle over here is like 4x minus 20, something like that. And then all you have to do is just add these together, right, and set them equal to 180 degrees, right? So if I'm doing this correctly, let's see, what do we have here? Add the 10 to the other side, we get 190, divide everything by 7, and that's approximately what you would get here. Let's see what that comes out to. So we've got 190 divided by 7, oops, about 27. I'll just say approximately 27, okay. Yeah, so other questions, other things you want to talk about, we can talk about any type of SAT math question that you want today. The more specific the question, the more I'll be able to kind of assist you and give you some better ideas about how to work with those types of problems. What do you think? Where's everybody basically from? Or what states are you guys from? Are you from West Coast, East Coast? Where's everybody from? I'm here in Michigan. Okay, Kezia's from Florida and Dario's from Georgia. Okay, great. Okay, good. Yeah, very good. So we're more East Coasters, right? We're on Eastern Standard Time. I know some people probably just waking up over there on the west side of the country. But yeah, so other questions you want to talk about? What other things would you like to discuss? Okay, Kezia and Dario are neighbors. Yeah, that's right. You guys could create your own little study group over there. That would be cool. So what do you think? Other questions, other things you want to talk about? So far we've talked about basically systems of equations. We talked a little bit about angle measures, right? What other things? Okay, Dario's asking, what's a good book to study for the SAT? Okay, Dario, that's a great question. So as far as books go, okay, the best thing to do really, okay, would be to go over to the SAT College Board website, and they've got 8, right so far, I mean, they keep adding more each month or so. They have 8 official practice tests, okay, and they have the solutions there as well. And what you can do is you can download those, or you can even take the tests online. So that'll give you some practice, and you can kind of see which problems that you're getting stumped on, and you're missing, and you forgot, and so forth. So I would go over to that SAT College Board site. Just Google it; you'll be able to find it. Okay, Dario says, yes, I use Khan Academy with College Board. Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's a very good resource. Aside from that resource, okay, Kezia's asking about the y-intercept. Okay, yeah, we'll talk about y-intercept too. The other thing too is I can let you know about the course that I put together for you guys, and that's the huge SAT Math Review video course. I go through 39 different concepts in that video course. It's all, just with me at the whiteboard going through the formulas and a teaching section, and we go through some practice problems through 39 different concepts that are tested on the math section of the SAT. So if you're interested in that, I've got 3 free lessons that you can check out to see if you're interested, and the link is in the description of this video. So if you go to the link in the description, you'll see that, and you can check those out after the live stream. But yeah, but basically, okay, so Kezia is asking about the y-intercept. That's a very good question, Kezia, because you know what? They are testing us on this equation. They want to make sure that after you've taken all those math classes in high school that you remember the y equals mx plus b form of the equation of a line, right? So the m stands for what? And the b stands for what? Well, the m is the slope, right? And the b is the y-intercept. So they could very well, what they do oftentimes, if you look at the official practice test, is they'll give you an equation, something like h is the height equals 3 y plus, let's just say it's like 48. Okay, and so they'll say this is an equation for the height of somebody y after y years. Okay, so let's just take that scenario I just mentioned. So this is an equation that relates somebody's height as a function of the number of years. So what do you think Kezia, what do you think the 48 stands for in this equation? Any idea what this 48 stands for? So you were asking about y-intercept. So what do you think? What does that 48 stand for? Any ideas? Okay, Daria's asking about how to graph linear equations. Yeah, we can talk about that. Kezia is saying equal to 0. Okay, yeah, so basically when you talk about the y-intercept, that's basically the value when y is equal to 0, because you can see if you put 0 in for y, the person's height would be 48 inches, right? They'd be like 4 feet tall. And that's the key. See, when you look at this equation, the slope-intercept form of a line, the b value, it's the y-intercept. But another way to look at it when it comes to a story problem is it's the initial condition. The initial meaning like the starting condition. This is the height of the person at the start of this time, this time frame at year 0, right? So then let me ask you another question. What do you think the 3 stands for? And anybody can jump in on this one. What do you think the 3 stands for in this equation? What do you think? Well, if we kind of look at right above here, see it, y is kind of like our h, 3 is like our m, 48 is like our b, right? So that m is 3. That means that's the slope. But what does 3 really represent? Well, the slope is another name for the slope, especially when it comes to story problems or word problems. What you want to remember here is slope is the rate of change, the rate of change. So what it means is that this person is growing by 3 inches per year. So if 1 year goes by, now they're going to be, yeah, that's right, Kezia, for every 1 increase, it goes up by 3. Ashil Barassi, is this live? Yes, it is live. So you're welcome to ask questions. We're talking about the SAT, the new SAT, the math section. So the more detailed the question, the more that I can assist, and that's what we're doing here right now. So yeah, so welcome to the live stream. But Dario was asking about graphing. So kind of just jumping on from this particular question, like, you want to know how to graph lines, you want to know how to graph inequalities, and you really want to make yourself familiar with this equation. Okay, Sheila's saying, can you do geometry? Yeah, we can do geometry, but can you be a little bit more specific about what aspect of geometry, even if you have a specific problem or something? The more specific you can be, the better that I can assist. But Dario was asking about, graphing lines, graphing linear equations. And so if you can get it into this form, Dario, where you have that y equals 2x plus 1, or the y equals mx plus b, you get that y by itself, all you have to do is, go ahead and say, all right, here's my x-axis, here's my y-axis. The b is the y-intercept, so that means it's crossing here at 1, right? And then the m, the number in front of the x, that's your slope. Okay, you can think of this as a fraction by putting it over 1. remember the slope is the rise over the run, so from this point I'm going to go rise 2, run 1, and you can repeat that process, rise 2, run 1, and so on, and that's how you get your line. The other way to do this, a lot of students like this method, is you can set x to 0 and solve for the y-intercept, and set y to 0 and solve for the x-intercept. Once you find those 2 points, then you just graph your line through those 2 points. So I don't know, does that help you a little bit more, Dario? Is that kind of what you were asking about? So again, basically what we were talking about here is just the slope-intercept form of the line. And then up here we were talking about how the slope refers to the rate and the y-intercept refers to the initial condition. So if you're just joining us on the live stream now, we're just doing a Q&A. So anything you want to ask me about, or anything you want, any type of question, the more specific you can be, the more that I can, address it a little bit better to help you get something more out of this. So yeah, so the more you can put in, the more you can get out, basically, right? So what other things would you like to talk about? We've got some diehards with us. Dario and Kezio are asking a lot of good questions, and Ashil, I think, is just joining us, asking us about geometry. But what do you think? Other questions, other things you want to talk about? I'm happy to help you guys out any way that would be helpful. What other kinds of questions would you like to talk about? Has anybody taken the ACT at all, or the PSAT? Have you taken those tests at all? Do you remember which ones were giving you trouble there? So, yesterday I did a live stream on the ACT, talking about the ACT, and I'll just mention a question that I bring this question up all the time to students because, every point counts, right? So, every question that you get right, that's an extra point, right? So there's no reason why you shouldn't try to capture every single possible point. And an easy question to get right is this question right here that involves, the equation of a circle, right? So I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but if you haven't, I would definitely memorize this. The center of the circle is at h comma k, and r is equal to the radius of the circle, right? So for example, if they give you an equation that looks like this, x minus 2 squared. Okay, Ashil's asking about complex numbers. Okay, that's more specific. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that together. Yeah, so we can definitely do that. Good question. We'll do that one next, okay? And then let's see, then this equals 16. So let's see, so Kezia and Dario and Ashil, what do you think? Let's see, argon diagrams. I'm not familiar with argon diagrams. Maybe you can tell me more about that. You mean like Venn diagrams? But let's see, so basically, can you guys tell me where's the center of this circle and what's the radius? So where's the center of the circle and what's the radius? It's a good question, huh? What do you think? Oh, Lou K is just joining us. Can you please solve a system of linear equations? Oh, you know what? I just did, Lou. If you just go back a little bit to the beginning of this live stream, that was one of the first questions we did, so you can check that out. Good question, but yeah, we talked about linear equation systems. But so yeah, so can anybody tell me, so where's the center of this circle and what's the radius? And then we're going to talk about some complex numbers that Ashil wanted to talk about. What do you think? Any thoughts? No? Anybody? Center of the circle, radius of the circle? What do you think? Huh. Ah, there we go. Okay, Kezia's saying 2 comma 3. What do you think? Is that right? The radius is 16. Is Ashil right? Lou says the radius is 16. Well, you're very close, but okay. First of all, see how this is r squared? See how that's the radius squared? We have to take the square root of 16 to get the radius. So the radius here is actually just 4, right? And then the center is actually at positive 2 and negative 3, okay? Now you're probably saying to yourself, well, why positive 2 and why negative 3? Okay, yeah, Dario, you're right. 2, negative 3, radius 4. See, it's the opposite sign. See how it's x minus h, x minus 2, so it's actually a positive 2. See, y minus k, this is like y minus a negative 3. So what you can think of is these actually have the opposite sign. See, that's minus, this is positive, this is positive, this is negative. It's the opposite, and you have to just make sure to take the square root. So then if you wanted to graph that circle, all you have to do is go ahead and locate the center. So 2, negative 3, so be right there. And if the radius is 4 from this point, you just go up 4, down 4, right? right 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and left 4, right? 3, 4, so be right. And that just kind of gives you some easy to plot points, and then you've got your circle. So if you're just joining us, we're just doing some SAT math Q&A, questions and answers. So if you can ask questions in the chat, the more specific, the more that I can help you with that. And if you guys have questions for each other, go ahead and ask those in the chat. Sometimes, some of the best benefits come from the help that everyone provides to each other. But let's go to what Ashil was saying. So Ashil was asking about complex numbers. So what's a complex number? Well, a complex number is a number that's, oh, okay, Dario's asking about how to solve quadratic equations. Okay, good question. Yeah, we can do that one next. But let's talk about complex numbers for a second, and then we'll get into the quadratic equation. So complex numbers, you know what they are. They're part real, and they're part imaginary, right? So altogether, that makes them complex. So for example, if you had a number like 3 plus 2i, yeah, that's right. So b is the imaginary part, the bi. Okay, and then a is the real part. That's exactly right. So Ashil, you were asking about these complex numbers, so maybe you can answer this question. Anybody can answer it, really, but say if I wanted to subtract this complex number minus this complex number, what would you get for that one? This is a common question. They want you to understand complex numbers on the SAT, so definitely something important to talk about. So what do you think? If you had to subtract these, what do you think you would get? What would the result be? By the way, if you're real from real, okay, good. That's a good start. Yep, so what do you think the final result would be? Imaginary from imaginary. Okay, that's a good. Okay, so what do you get? What would the final answer be? What would the result be here? So you're subtracting these two complex numbers. What do you think? Any thoughts on that? What would the final answer be? Do we do distribution? Yeah, Kezia, okay, that's a good point. You could think of it as distribution. You could think of this as like -1 here, okay, and you could say, well, I'm going to take this -1 and distribute it, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So that would be -4. Okay, Ashil is saying -1 plus 5i. Okay, let's double check his or her work there and see if that's correct, okay? So we distributed following Kezia's suggestion. Okay, now all we have to do is combine like terms. So 3 plus -4 is -1. 2i plus 3i is 5i, and you've got it. So that's exactly right. So Ashil was right. And let me ask you another question about complex numbers. Does everybody know what I squared equals? What does I squared equal? Does anybody remember that one? This is important. You want to know what I squared is. Do you remember, anybody? What do you think? Remember, I is equal to what? Square root of -1. Okay, Dario's saying it's -1, and Ashil's saying root -1, Kezia's saying 2, and Dario's saying question mark. Okay, so let's see. I is equal to square root of -1. So if I squared, that means you're doing square root of -1. Okay, Mancy's joining us, -1. Yeah, that's exactly right. So when you take the square root of -1 times square root of -1, you get -1. So I'll show you another example with complex numbers, and then we're going to talk about quadratic equations a little bit. That's what Dario was wondering about. So say, for example, we had the same problem, 3 plus 2i, but instead of subtracting, we're multiplying these two complex numbers. So what do you think? What's 3 plus 2i times 4 minus 3i? See if you can calculate that one. And if you're thinking of other questions you want to talk about, put those in the chat. We can definitely talk about those. Okay, Dario's saying the FOIL method. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's go with Dario's method. So remember, FOIL is that acronym. It stands for first, outer, inner, and last, right? So the first terms means the first term in this group times the first term in this group. That gives you 12. The O stands for the outer ones, the ones towards the outside. So that's 3 times -3i, which is -9i. The I is for the inside. Those are ones towards the middle or the center. So that's 4 times 2i, which is 8i. And then the last means the last term in this group times the last term in this group. So 2i times -3i is what? It's -6i squared. Because remember, I times I, that's I squared. It's like x times x squared. So now let's go back. -9i plus 8i is -1i, right? This is 12. But now remember how we said that, okay, good, Dario, yeah, combine like terms. I squared is a -1. But then times this -6 would actually give us a +6. And then like Dario was saying, we want to combine like terms. So that's going to give us 18 minus I. Okay, yeah, Sheil said 6. Okay, that's good. And then, so yeah, then you just want to combine the real together and the imaginary together, and you always want to put it in that a plus bi form. The real first, imaginary second, and then 18 minus I is your final result. So we did subtracting complex numbers. Here we did multiplying complex numbers. We talked about how I squared equals -1, and we talked about how I is equal to the square root of -1. So that's kind of a little good intro to complex numbers, definitely something important. So if you're just joining us, put your questions in the chat, and the more specific the question, the more that I can help assist you with that, and everyone that's on the live stream can help you as well. So yeah, so the more questions you ask, the more that I can assist, right? Okay, but let's see. I think Dario was asking about quadratic equations. So what is a quadratic equation? Does everybody know what a quadratic equation is? What does quadratic mean? It's a little confusing because quad, sounds like four, right? Like quadriceps or something like that. But quadratic actually means that it's in this form. It's a second degree equation, like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, right? So one of the easiest ways to solve quadratic equations is to get everything on one side, set it to 0, and then of course you can use the infamous quadratic formula, right? Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a, right? That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is you could try to factor this, factor it and set the factors equal to 0. For example, like if I had x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0, I could just say, well, let me factor this, and then I could set each factor equal to 0, right? That's another option. Does anybody know how to factor x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0? Does anybody know how to factor this left side of the equation? Okay, Kezia is saying, can we do ratio and probability next? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We can definitely talk about that. If you have something more specific, about that, let me know. But yeah, we can talk about that in a general way. But yeah, if you're just joining us on the live stream, welcome. We're talking about not ACT, but SAT math. Okay, Mansi Joshi is saying x minus 4, x plus 3. Dario is saying find the multiples. Okay, let's see. X minus 4, x plus 3. Yeah, so it's kind of like doing the FOIL method backwards, right? So you can see like first times first gives us x squared. Okay, that's good. And then last times last gives us a -12. And then all we're doing is checking that the inner product and the outer product, see negative 4x and positive 3x, add up to the middle term, negative 1x. So that's exactly right. So then all you have to do now is you just take this group, x minus 4, and you set it equal to 0. And the same thing over here, you set x plus 3 equal to 0. And if you add 4 to both sides, subtract 3 from both sides, those are your two solutions, 4 or -3, right? So that's one way, Dario, to solve these quadratic equations, is to see if you can factor and then set the factors to 0. Or if it's more difficult to factor, you can always do the quadratic formula, and that's another way to do it. There's also completing the square, there's graphing, there's a lot of different techniques, but okay, Lewis. Okay, Lewis was with us on yesterday's live stream, so welcome back. Completing the square. Okay, so I guess we can talk about completing the square before we go over to Kezia's question about the ratios and probabilities and that kind of thing. Oh, okay, let's see. Dario's got one. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I like how specific you guys are being. So the more specific, the better I can help you guys out. I can always try to make them up off the top of my head, which I'm pretty good at doing, but sometimes it's better if you have something more specific. Okay, so you're asking me basically how to solve this one, Dario, is that right? And Lewis is asking about completing the square. Okay, so let's see if we can maybe tackle this from a couple different directions here. One way to do this is to clear the denominators. Okay, so can anybody tell me what the common denominator is of 3, 2, and 4? What's the lowest common multiple or the lowest common denominator of 3, 2, and 4? See if you can tell me what that is. What's 12? Okay, that's right, Dario. So if we multiply everything by 12, okay, good. Mansi says 12 also. Good, excellent. So that gives us 8x squared. This gives us -6x, and this gives us, let's see, what is that? -9, right? Okay, good. So now what we can do is, if we want to do the completing the square method, okay, just to show you another possibility is, we can well, we could try to factor this. We could try to do the quadratic formula, but if we want to do the completing the square method, what's sometimes easier is to get this leading coefficient equal to 1. Okay, so what I'm going to do here first is I'm going to add the 9 to the other side, just to get it out of the way. Okay, just to get it out of the way. I'm trying to show you kind of two techniques at once. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide everything by 8. So if I do that, I get x squared. 6 divided by 8 is 3/4, and then this, of course, is 9/8, right? Okay, so this is kind of to Luis Diaz's question. So how do you complete the square? Well, what you do is you take half of this middle coefficient. So what's half of 3/4? It's 3/8, and then if you square that, what's 3/8 squared? It's 9/64, right? But if you add 9/64 to the left side, you have to add 9/64 to the right side because you want to keep the equation balanced, right? So then all you have to do now is you just have to factor this. But the way we've set it up is we've set it up to be a perfect square, right? Let me multiply this by 8 over 8, which gives you 72 plus 9, which is 81/64. And then over here we've got x minus 3/8. Now just a quick hint, it's always going to be half of this middle coefficient when you do this completing the square process. So you take half the middle coefficient, you square it, and you add that to both sides, but when you go to factor it, it's going to be half of this middle coefficient. So then, Dario and Luis, all we have to do now, see we're in the home stretch, is we just have to take the square root, okay, the square root of both sides. And when you do that, how many answers do you get? 2, right? So that's 9/8. Plus or minus, right? And then the square and the square root cancel here, so we just get x minus 3/8. And all we have to do now is add the 3/8 to both sides to get x by itself. Okay, Kezia is asking a very specific question about ratios. Okay, well, we're going to do that one next, Kezia. Okay, good question. So then what you want to do here is just do the two problems. So 3/8 plus 9/8 is 12/8, right? So that's one of our answers. And 3/8 minus 9/8 is negative 6/8, and you can just reduce those. So does that help with the completing the square and solving quadratic equations? What do you think? Is that kind of what you were looking for? Does that help? So yeah, so if you're enjoying this live stream so far, make sure to give it a thumbs up so I know to do more of these for you guys and gals in the future. And that's great. And then if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and you can check out more math tutoring videos on my YouTube channel, Mario's Math Tutoring. And we're going to do Kezia's question here next, talking about the ratios. So let's go ahead and talk about ratios with Kezia. So let's see, and anybody can answer these questions, and think of other questions you want to ask me about too. But let's see, Kezia is saying the ratio of men to women is 5 to 3, right? If there are a total of 24 people in the group, okay, how many women are there? I got this problem from the ACT book. Okay. So this is a good question because you see how it says it's 5 to 3? Is the ratio of men to women. So I'm just going to put men to women. But it says there's 24 total people in the group. So instead of maybe setting it up like this, like men to women, why don't we do women, which is 3, to the total, which is 3 and 5, so 3 to 8. So now I'm doing the ratio of women to the total. Okay, and if there's 24 in the group, that's 24 down here, and we want to find out how many women there are in the group. So did you see what I did there, Kezia? I said 5 and 3 is 8. That gives us the total. So the ratio of women, which is 3 to the total, equals the ratio of the number of women to the total in the group, 24. All you have to do now is, you can do this one of two ways. You can either say 8 times 3 is 24. That's right, Mancy. And then 3 times 3 equals 9. Or if you don't like that method, you can cross multiply. You could say 8x equals 72. So you definitely want to know how to cross multiply, and solve ratios and proportions. Or you can do what I just did there, multiply the top by 3 and the bottom by 3. As long as you do the same thing to the numerator and denominator, that's the key. So other questions, we're definitely, you guys are asking some great questions. That's very good. The more you ask, the more that I can help you with that. And I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but I'll just mention it now. If you're preparing for the ACT or the SAT, the math sections, check out my 2 video courses. I have one for the ACT, and it goes through 65 different concepts. It's about 3.5 hours of video. You can have lifetime access to that. And then also with the SAT, I go through 39 concepts. covering the math section, and again, lifetime access. And you can go over there. I've got a link in the description of this live stream, so if you go down there, there's 3 free lessons in each of these 2 courses. So maybe go ahead and go through those 3 lessons first, see if it's something that you're interested in. You'll get some benefit out of those, and then if you want to go on and do the entire course, you can purchase that. So I definitely recommend these both of these courses, but if you're just focusing on the SAT, you might just want to get this one, or just the ACT, you might just want to get this one. But check those out, and yeah, so that's the idea there. So just one second, I had a little technical difficulty. Let me see here. Yeah, oh wow. Okay, there we go. Okay, so is everyone with me with that? Okay, so we're back. Had a little problem with my cell phone there for a second. Okay, so what do you think? Other questions, other things you want to talk about? You guys are asking some great questions. After this live stream, go on over to my Mara's Math Tutoring YouTube channel if you want to get some more help with the ACT and SAT. I've got a lot of videos talking about those concepts, but what other questions do you want to talk about? I'm looking back through the chat right now. Let's see what other things were asked. We can do another completing the square for Luis Diaz if he's still with us, just to kind of show you a little bit more about that. Like, see, say for example, if you had x squared minus 4x, let's just say plus 2, something like that, equals 0, right? So if you wanted to complete the square, the key is to get this constant to the other side. Okay, so you would subtract 2 from both sides. So we've got x squared minus 4x plus blank, right? And then all you have to do now to complete the square, Lewis, is you just take half of negative 4, which is negative 2, and then you square it, which is 4. So half of this middle number squared, so negative 2 squared is 4. But if you add 4 out of thin air to the left side, you have to add 4 to the right side because you want to keep the equation balanced. You don't want to change, the value of the overall equation, right? Then when you factor this, it works out to a perfect square. See, x minus 2, the quantity squared. But you set it up that way, right? So it's always going to be half of this middle coefficient. See, half of negative 4 is negative 2. But you can check it by FOILing this out. Once you get to this point, you're home free. You just have to take the square root of both sides. So you get plus or minus square root of 2. The square and the square root cancel. Then you just have to add the 2 to the other side. So you get x equals 2 plus or minus square root of 2. Make sure you put it in front of the plus or minus sign. That's the key. Okay, so Dario's asking about function notation. Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, so function notation, yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. So let's see. So when you talk about functions, what are we talking about? Well, functions are basically, you've probably seen this in your math class, or if you haven't gotten this far yet, you've got f of x equals, let's just do a simple example, 2x minus 3. What do you think f of 2 would equal? So you definitely want to understand how functions work for the SAT. If you're just joining us, we're just doing a Q&A, so anything you want to ask, the more specific the question, the better I can assist you, and we're just going through some different concepts and problems that you might want to know for the SAT math section. So yeah, so welcome to the live stream. So can anybody tell me, so what would be the value of f of 2? So Luis Diaz is saying 1. Okay, what do you think? Is that right? Yeah, that's exactly right, because, okay, so Dario, remember, whatever's in the parentheses goes in for x on the right side, right? So this is going to be 2 times 2 minus 3. So that's 4 minus 3, which is 1. So that's the key. Whatever's in the parentheses goes in place of x on the right. So that's it. So, I mean, function notation is just a different way of writing it. But when you see the f of x, this is really like the y value. It's like the output, and the x, whatever's in the parentheses, that's like your input. So it's just a different way of writing the equation. Instead of saying y equals mx plus b or something like that, they use f of x. So you could maybe name your function h of x for the height, or d of x for the distance, something like that. It's like a more descriptive way of writing the equation. All right, so what do you think? Other questions, other things you want to talk about? What other? I think somebody had another question on here. I might have passed over it. Let's see. So what do you think? Other questions you want to ask? Here's your chance. You've got me. We've got a nice small group here, so you can definitely get your questions answered. So what else would you like to talk about? So if you're interested, I'll just mention, if you're interested in online tutoring with me for your math class or for the ACT or the SAT, I'm also available for that. If you're if you're interested in getting some private online tutoring with me. Usually during the school year I'm super busy working with students in person, but sometimes I work with students online as well if they're not, you know, in my local area here. So yeah, so basically let's see, something happened here. Technical difficulties. Okay, let me see. Okay, here we go. So Lou K is asking us, let's see, if y equals kx, where k is a constant. Okay, so let's write this down. Y equals kx, where k is a constant, and y equals 24 when x equals 6, right? What is the value of y when x is equal to 5? Okay, so you know what Lou K is asking us? Okay, Lou's asking us about direct variation equations. So this is like what they call y varies directly with x. Okay, and k is what's your constant of variation. Some books use the letter a, so y equals a times x. But the key here is they give us a hint, right? They say, well, when y is 24, x is 6. So if we divide both sides by 6, it looks like a equals 4, right? So then you just have to put that 4 back in for a. So now you've got y equals 4x. Now we've got a more specific equation, and it says, well, what does y equal when x equals 5? Well, let's put 5 in for x now, and you get 4 times 5, so y equals 20. So basically, Lou, I don't know if that helps you a little bit better, but basically you start off with your direct variation equation. Y varies directly with x. They give you this information over here to kind of help you to solve for that constant of variation. Okay, then once you have that more specific equation, you can put 5 in for x, and you can solve for y. So yeah, so good question. Direct variation equations, you know, something important to understand for the math section of the SAT. So yeah, great question. So other questions, what do you think? Other things you want to talk about? So is everybody a subscriber to my Mario's Math Tutoring YouTube channel? Have you guys found out about me through the YouTube channel, or did you just stumble on this online, or how did you find me? Through my channel? Yeah, so pretty much I've been uploading videos, you know, on a regular basis, probably averaging about 1 a week or so. So there's new videos coming out all the time. You can check that out, and you can also search on my YouTube channel for specific concepts for your math class. Okay, Nancy's saying through your channel. Okay, great. And Louis says Dario asked about graphing. Yeah, good question. So Dario asked about graphing. Oh, Kezia's a subscriber. Okay, great. But let's see, somebody asked a specific question. Kezia's asking about a geometry question. Line M passes through the point 4,3 in a standard xy coordinate plane and is perpendicular to the line described by the equation y equals negative 4/5 x plus 6. Which of the following describes line M? Well, here, let's just talk about this. So, see, if the equation is y equals negative 4/5 x plus 6, and it passes through the point 4,3, and it's perpendicular. So let me ask you a question, Kezia. What's the slope of the line that's perpendicular? Oh, Dario, you were asking about graphing functions. Oh, I'm sorry, Dario. We'll come back to that one after this question. We'll talk about graphing functions. Okay, thanks, Luis, for double checking with me. Okay, that's great. So yeah, we'll go back. We'll talk about graphing functions. So basically, okay, y equals negative 4/5 x plus 6. So what's the slope of the line that's perpendicular, meaning at a right angle to this line? Does anybody know what the slope of that perpendicular line is? So what do you know about the slopes of parallel lines, and what do you know about the slopes of perpendicular lines? Uh-oh, what do you guys think? What's the slope of the perpendicular line to this line? Okay, 5/4. So, okay, good. So that's exactly right. So Tazzy is answering that one. Yeah, that's right. So what you want to do is you want to take the opposite reciprocal. So you take the opposite sign. Okay, yep, Nancy says it's negative reciprocal. Lou says that, okay, they're equal if they're parallel. That's right. If they're parallel, they're equal, but if they're perpendicular, they're opposite reciprocals. So what we have now is y equals 5/4 x plus b. So this is a 6 over here. This is a b over here. But Kezia, if it goes to the point 4,3, they're giving you a hint. So you put 4 in for x, 3 in for y, and then you solve for b. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. We got 3 equals 5/4 times 4 over 1. The 4's cancel, right? That's just 5. We subtract 5 from both sides. That means b equals negative 2. And you put negative 2 back in, and you've got it. So it's y equals 5/4 x minus 2. Now, okay, to kind of basically merge with Dario's question about graphing functions, see, y equals 5/4 x minus 2 is a function. It's just not written in the function notation. So for example, instead of writing it as y, I could write this as f of x equals 5/4 x minus 2. And then we could graph that function. Is that what you mean by graphing functions, Dario? Is that what you were asking about, is how to graph something like this? Well, if we were going to graph this, you can see it's just the y-intercept's -2, so we go down 2 on the y-axis, and then the 5/4 is the slope, and remember slope is rise over run, so from here we're going to go rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a run 1, 2, 3, 4, so rise 5, run 4, and then all you have to do is get out your straight edge and draw a line through those 2 points. So it's really just like graphing lines, like in this particular case it's just a line, but here I've written it in function notation, the f of x notation. So graphing functions is, it depends, whether it's a quadratic function or a linear function, cubic function, polynomial function, like it depends on the particular graph. But functions, there's all different kinds of functions. Like some functions that you should probably just kind of know are like the absolute value function, like this guy here, right? Of course, the quadratic function, which is the parabola like this. Square root function, this is an important one, so it looks like this, right? So you might want to review, these graphs, and how these graphs look and how to graph them. So yeah, so good questions. Everybody's asking some really good questions. So what do you think? Other things you want to ask me? Other things you want to talk about for the SAT, the math section? What do you think? Anything else you want to discuss in more detail? Could you do probability? Oh yeah, I think somebody asked about that earlier. I completely forgot. Okay, yeah, go. Good question. So does anybody know like what's the definition of probability? So I mean, they want, on the SAT they don't get too deep into probability, but they'll ask you some basic probability questions. So what's the definition of probability? Any ideas? What is probability? Well, we know probability is like the chance that something can happen, the likelihood that something could happen, what's the probability of rain today, that kind of thing. But, strictly speaking, probability, you could think of it as the number of successful outcomes, right? The number of successes divided by the total possible outcomes. So I'll just say total outcomes, total possible outcomes. So a super simple example, okay, just super simple example, is say you have a hat, and in the hat there's 2 red marbles and 1 blue marble.